Today, we're going to be burrowing deep into Green Hill Zone to establish how Sonic's physics and collisions worked on a 7 MHz processor with no floating point arithmetic. Back in 1991, Sonic was an impressive piece of programming, pairing cutting-edge home hardware with great game design. Whilst many of Sega's arcade boards shared the same 68,000 CPU as the Mega Drive, those that relied heavily on maths ended up bolting on additional custom hardware. Case in point, Afterburner. Whilst it had two much faster 68,000 CPUs running in parallel, Sega actually implemented additional custom chips to handle multiplication and division. This is because whilst performing a multiply or divide on the CPU was perfectly possible, it was approximately 20 times slower than an addition or a subtraction. For a pseudo 3D game with hundreds of calculations per frame, this really becomes a bottleneck. The Mega Drive had none of this specialised arcade technology, and yet Sonic runs at 60 frames a second on a single CPU. To do this, it can't rely on a physics engine in the true sense of the word. You certainly can't afford to ask, what angle is the ground under Sonic's feet, and work it out using traditional geometry. So stick around and I'll talk you through how the original assembly code works, and at the end we'll look at how my Amiga port of Sonic is progressing. We're all very familiar with Sonic. But what if I was to tell you that there's a hidden dimension to the game we know and love? A world of angles, peculiar shapes, and esoteric rules. And for Green Hill Zone, that entire world fits in just 410 bytes of data. If you were to store the words I've said so far in a plain text file, they'd be around 4 times that size. Each block that makes up a level in Sonic is overlaid with an invisible shape that can only be seen by the game code. Here in the Sonic LVL editor, we can overlay the complete collision data and see what's going on under the hood. It looks cool, but what does it all mean? Well, what we're looking at here isn't a polygon or a bitmap, even though it's visualized as one. It's actually 16 bytes of data. Each byte is a column of data which records how tall that column is. So if every byte was set to 0, that would be a flat surface. If it was set to 8, that would be a raised surface. And if we were to increment the number as we go from left to right, we create a very steep incline, effectively a 45-degree angle. Although I previously used the term angles, they aren't calculated. Each of these blocks has a pre-calculated hard-coded angle. So whilst it's easy for us humans to deduce the angle of each of these pieces by eyeballing it, it would involve CPU time we don't have to calculate. And by now you're probably noticing a trend, which is, if in doubt, pre-calculate. Don't perform calculations on the fly. Now, there's a further trick with Sonic's angles. They don't use a typical 360 degrees. Instead, they use 256 steps, which the programmers will know packs into a single byte of data. This is not only a space optimization, but a further performance optimization too. It means that if I increase the angle by 1 step from 255, it automatically wraps to 0 with no costly boundary check. Alright, so that's the basics of how all of the collisions and physics are defined in just 60 shapes, or height maps for Green Hill Zone, which will have been manually placed by the level designer. How does Sonic smoothly traverse these contours? Whilst many games of the era handle collisions via a basic hitbox, Sonic has 2 probes or sensors that are essentially a pair of invisible lines that are emitted from close to his feet. These invisible lines are 14 pixels long and intersect with the first collision block they find. Imagine them pointing downwards, intersecting with one of the collision blocks we were previously discussing, and this determines the frame Sonic uses so that he's angled properly. They also pop Sonic to the correct height. If he's gone downwards through the ground, he's repositioned upwards before rendering. As this happens 60 times a second, the results are smooth and fluid. The fact that these sensors are 14 pixels long is the reason Sonic doesn't hug the ground when running off the crest of a steep hill. As the drop is greater than 14 pixels, the sensors find nothing. Sonic is airborne and starts to fall downwards until the ground is within reach. It feels like physics, but it's really the clever combination of a very simple set of rules. The engine keeps the smaller of the two distances from each foot to the ground. The smaller of the two distances wins. That is the main rule. Let's look at some examples. 1. Sonic doesn't fall through small gaps. If one foot is over a hole and the other isn't, the distance to the ground is smaller than the distance to a giant hole. He walks over it and the smaller distance wins. 2. Sonic steps up onto ledges. If one foot is already clipping the scenery, the distance to the scenery is negative. That's the smaller of the two distances and it wins, causing Sonic to step upwards. 3. Sonic always tilts to the steeper foot. The angle comes from the winning sensor. Sonic visibly leans as he reaches the bottom of a slope before his feet get there. Hitting a wall works in a similar way. The only difference is a new sensor is rotated at 90 degrees depending on Sonic's direction. The underlying concept is identical. Some additional properties are added which are coloured in the level editor. White means that you can jump upwards through a collision area but not move downwards through it. Whereas black is fully solid in all directions. Yellow is a surface you can jump into but not stand on. Let's look at the classic Sonic loop. We've already covered the building blocks that enable Sonic to traverse through the scenery in the game. But if we look in detail at how the loop works, it's clear that it behaves differently depending on the direction it's approached from. If Sonic approaches from left to right at the correct speed, he cleanly runs around the loop. But the loop effectively crosses over itself, and Sonic can also approach from the opposite direction. At this point, the underlying collision tiles need to behave differently because Sonic passes through the section of the loop he's just been glued to. The solution is actually very simple when you look into it. The loop is stored twice in the level data. Both loops look the same, but the solidarity flags differ, so they behave differently. In the front path, the right-hand curve is solid and the left-hand curve is thin air. In the back path, it's the other way around. The code checks the rendering priority bit of the loop to determine which of the two loops to use, and it essentially hands over between the two loops at the halfway point. I'm now 9 months into the Amiga port of Sonic, enough time to create a child. The collision system is actually the part of Sonic that I know the least about. The reason being it's the component I've barely had to change. It's an invisible layer with no rendering dependencies. That's pure 68,000 code. Much of it is truly copy and paste. The only change has been memory addressing fixes to work around optimizations that relied on the Mega Drive's RAM being only 64K. Whereas all the rendering code has been heavily rewritten. The code that determines where Sonic's feet are is practically identical to the 1991 Mega Drive approach. Okay, let's see how this runs on hardware. This is running purely from chip RAM. The reason why my display is black and white at the moment is I'm actually running quite low on chip RAM, so I had to lower the resolution to have enough free to show you this. So, okay, let's give this a go. Now, I was going to play this, but what I realised was I'm terrible at playing the game and talking at the same time, especially as I have to almost look the wrong way to play it. So
The demo mode is in there, so I can leave this rolling until the demo mode kicks in, and then you can see it, and then I can talk at the same time. So we're feature complete now, apart for the first level, apart from the power-ups, the HUD, and the audio. So it is really, really close to getting to a point where we can demo this, and hopefully that's going to be towards the end of next month. I've been doing absolutely tons of optimizations to make this thing run faster. The the code is just getting absolutely berserk now, and I'm a bit worried about how later levels are going to play out as a result of all the optimizations I've had to do. But it is what it is, and we are getting there in terms of having Sonic really genuinely running on the A1200. Some of the slowest parts of the game at the moment are the collapsing cliff, which I have optimized, and there are some graphical defects as well in places. I think they're related to some of the sprite caching code. So, yeah, that's where we are at the moment.
I'm now at the stage where I've implemented a profiler, as the next round of optimizations need to be measured in detail on hardware. The obvious ones are all done and implemented. I'll cover the details in a later video. I'm taking a couple of weeks off for the summer, but I'm aiming to release a demo in late August so you can try it for yourself. Either subscribe to the channel or the Patreon to stay informed. See you next time.